Ko te mihi tuatahi ki te atua nāna nei ngā mea katoa, ko te mihi tuarua ki ngā mate haere, haere, haere. Ko te mihi tuatoru ki a koutou, nau mai, hara mai ki te hui te atanei, anō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā ra tātou katoa. For anyone who can't speak Māori, the literal translation for that is just, what's up? And a welcome. Normally I would open up with what our people Māori call a tauparapara. This is a chant or a ritual way of opening up a mihi or a greeting, so I'll share it after the fact so I can translate it. Tūhia ki te rangi, tūhia ki te whenua, tūhia ki te ngākau o ngā tangata. Ko te mea nui ko te aroha, tihei wā mauri ora. Write it in the skies, write it in the land, write it in the hearts of all the people. The greatest thing is love. Behold, let there be life. A part of me introducing myself is all the people who come behind me. I won't go way into the distance, so I'll just talk about my whānau. I've been married to my wife, Chloe, for 10 years now, and I'm very lucky. She's pretty cool. We have 3 children. Our eldest boy is Paura. He's 8 years old. We have our middle girl, Henewai, she's 3. And we have our latest baby who's 5 months old, Mahina. The interesting thing about having 3 kids is I was an only child, which means I've never really seen sibling rivalry up close before. And it's, it has its good days and its bad days. I remember my son ruled the roost at home for about 5 years, and he was top dog, right? And then his little sister arrived, and she got a bit bigger, and all of a sudden, his Lego was broken, there's glitter in his undie drawer. And this one night, I tuck him into bed, and I read him a story, and I disappear for 5 minutes. And when I come back to give him his final kiss, he's crying. And not just normal kind of kid crying, but wolf crying, really howling. And I say, son, what's wrong? And he goes, Dad, when you were gone, I said something really bad. And I said, what'd you say? He goes, it's even worse than the F word. I said to myself, you need to stop hanging out with Tayshawn. But I said, son, what did you say? And he goes, Dad, when you were outside, I told myself, I hate my sister Henewai. I hugged him and I said, that's okay, son. Sometimes we say things that we don't mean. And he said, but Dad, I do hate my sister Henewai. A little bit about my mahi or my work. As Linda mentioned, I'm the program director for a charity. Love my job. I describe myself as the heart of the organisation because I love the work and I love the workers, but that didn't quite cut it on a job title or my job description. So my official title is Program Director, and it means that I oversee about 60 employees, but we do programs all throughout communities from Invercargill, way down the south, all the way up north to the Hokianga. Now, the cool thing about my job is that I get to interact with lots of different people all of the time, and literally there are 4 different pairs of shoes in my car. I've got a pair of gumboots, red bands. I've got some jandals. I've got some business shoes. I've got an ankle bracelet, just to make sure that I'm always, kind of appropriately dressed for those that I interact with. It's a bad joke, but it is a challenge actually trying to communicate and engage with the vast array of people who I'm in front of. Last year in the same week, I did a $500,000 pitch on behalf of our charity to a CEO of one of New Zealand's largest banks. I was trying to shore up a relationship down here in Wellington in front of someone who gives out $500 million in funding to community organisations. I did a parenting seminar on a Tuesday night, and I also did, get this, a driver safety workshop to alternative education students. These are students who don't do that well in mainstream schools. And I did one more thing. I curled up in the fetal position at the end of that week. But there was a sense of, how can I be all things to all people? And I realised one morning that the way that I can be all things to all people is around the kaupapa or the message that I bring. Because what I'm talking about is whanaungatanga or families, right? So that's what our charity was all about. And I've realised that I can work with all of those different stakeholders because parents, children, in-laws especially, families are the great leveller of all of us. It doesn't matter how intelligent or powerful you are, you will still be brought to your knees by a 2-year-old who is crying that there is too much jam on the toast. So within this context, plain language within families is a really nice fit. You know, the most profound and moving statements that you can make to the people that you care about the most are so simple. Yes, I will marry you. I love you. Dad, I'm scared. Babe, I forgive you. Plain language. And if we can do that, the emphasis is taken off what you're trying to communicate, and the emphasis is put onto the meaning behind those words. And isn't that what being human is all about? The meaning behind those words. I've got an agenda, and that's this. I don't really care about increasing the GDP. I'm not so interested in the profit margins of your organisation, although that is great. My life's goal is always oriented towards humans flourishing, relationships being deeper and richer, and plain language is a really simple way to make sure that can happen within families. In New Zealand, we have 3 national languages: English, Māori, and also sign language. Now, Māori, the indigenous language here, there's a well-known word for love called aroha. Aroha. Aroha meaning love in Māori. Now, the translation of aroha, and there's a few different translations, but my favourite one is aro, the first half of the word meaning turning towards, and ha, meaning the breath of life. So to love someone is to turn towards sharing the breath of life with them. So in that sense, to me, good communication is around bridging those gaps and moving towards closer relationship. And not so good communication is the opposite. It actually moves you away from having those relationships with people. The topic at hand, to trust or not to trust. Today I want to talk about techniques, tips and tricks that will help you engender trust with any audience that you're in front of, whether that's a large crowd, whether that's a boardroom, whether that's just one-on-one. But I'm going to do it Quentin Tarantino styles. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the end of the movie and then we're going to work backwards from there, all right? So to the question, how do you appear trustworthy to your colleagues? The answer is be trustworthy. Mic drop. Everything I say today will come back to that one thing, and that's the idea that character and virtue alongside competence is the dream, right? But if you're not a trustworthy person, then that's an issue. Now, my goal is to be trustworthy, and I know it's difficult. Some people trust too easily, so your job as the other person is to help them have barriers so they don't get stamped on again. To people who do not trust at all, you need to work really hard to make sure you earn their trust, their ear, their confidence. I know it's difficult, but it is worth it. Let me tell you where I learned a whole lot about trust. It was in front of teenagers. For 10 years, I was a youth practitioner, I was a youth worker, and a lot of that was actually in the organisation that I stand in. For the first 4 years of my time in this organisation, I travelled the country speaking to high school students about sex, drugs, self-esteem, getting along with your parents. And let me say, teenagers taught me a lot about trust, because their bullshit radar is way up there, right? And they can spot a fake from a mile off. So I'm going to share with you some insights through my time with teenagers, because if you can win over a bunch of 14-year-old boys about drinking alcohol healthily on a Thursday afternoon at 2:15, you can win over everybody. Cool. All right. On to my next slide. What teenagers can teach us about trust? As I said, for 4 years before I became the manager of that department, I travelled New Zealand, and I had the best job, man. I mean, I love my job now, but when I was a 20-year-old, it was the best job to have that. Cruising around in my little work car, rolling up to school, speaking to tens of thousands of teenagers. Over the space of about 4.5 years, I spoke to more than 150,000 teenagers in New Zealand through 1,200 hours worth of presentations, 1,200 periods worth of presentations. And what was interesting is the travel would get to you. Get this is how crazy my schedule was. In 1 year, get this, I went to Hamilton, okay? And so my schedule was really busy. Now, I traveled all over, and you would engage with young people, and you had about a 2.5 minute window gap. Now, I don't have any empirical data to back this up. All I have is the amount of rolled eyes that I would get in front of all of the young people. But about 2.5 minutes to convince them that you were worth listening to for the next 2.5 minutes to when they would go, then they would decide whether they would listen for the next 40. Now, there was this really, really small window. And in those interactions, I saw a microcosm of the whole of my life being played out. Speaking to teenagers was difficult, because I was trying to be like an encouraging guy, trying to say something like, you deserve a great life. Someone would heckle you, your life sucks. There was actually a lot of barriers to get through, and those barriers proved to be the making of my career, but actually of my approach to humanity, to what it looked like to walk into any room and sit with people and understand the barriers and the constructs that were stopping me and that other person from connecting. In Attitude, we got really good at winning over teenage audiences. There was a team of 10 of us. We've been going for like 15 years now, but we speak to about 250,000 teenagers in high schools throughout the country. And we had a scoping review done on the team last year, and this scoping review was done within the youth sector, and it actually it said this, which I think is a good indicator of our ability to win teenagers over. The nature and method of communication creates a distorted sense of connection with attitude presenters. Now, there have been lots of big business trying to get into what is the majority of teenagers in this country, trying to see us as a doorway to sell to them. And the most interesting thing is dealing with CEOs or people with budgets that are literally 10 times larger than our organisation. Our budget's about 5 million. And they just think that it just happens, and they don't realise that we've actually come up with our own framework, a systematic way of engaging with people. So I'm going to share that with you today. All that to say, the basis of this framework and what I'm going to go on to talk to you about is all centered in stuff that you already know, and that's this: an audience-centric focus. Here's the funny thing, though, is that even though we know this, and maybe you do it in writing, do you do it in conversation? Right. Do you genuinely think about how your words are going to be heard, not just what you're going to say? I don't know, maybe. Probably not. And the reason I say probably not is most people I know, including myself, are on our own island of self-interest. The genuine truth is no one cares about what you care about as much as you do. Right? They just don't. So we actually need to figure out ways to engage people in that conversation. Cool. Right, so what I'm going to do is go through 4 really simple steps, and trust is one of those steps. And I'm going to show you how we would do this within high schools, but how I've gone on to do it within the corporate sector, within pitches around money or pitches to government, all of that stuff. Cool. So the first key question that you need to ask of any audience, especially teenagers, or they will eat you alive, is this. Right. They're looking at you going, do I like you? This is not a conscious cognitive thing. They're summing you up, and they're trying to figure out whether they like you or not, what you're wearing, what you look like. Do you remind them of an ex? What are the welds going on to you speaking? Do they weld you speaking or someone speaking with authority or power? Have you thought about the demographic in front of you? Now, most people say, oh yeah, age, maybe profession. Have you thought about whether they're rural folk or city folk? After ethnicity, are there any other subcultures going on in the audience? How does the age of the participants affect the particular topic that you want to talk about? And I'm currently doing my master's thesis, and one of the papers that I did it on was motivators for the different generations within the workforce. Baby boomers, they don't want a big deal made out of them. They want the title, they want the respect, but then they want to get back to hard work, research says. Gen X, they're cynical. All right, they're going to weigh you up a lot more than Gen Y will. And the other thing that Gen X want on the whole is work-life balance. So can you build into their remuneration packages some golf? Gen Y, that's me. They just want friendship. They want someone to replace their mother. No, what they want is this real sense of altruism. Are they actually contributing to something much bigger than just their paycheck? Are you taking this stuff into consideration? What time of the day? I got the graveyard shift this afternoon. And for the reason that Linda hoped I could make people laugh. But you guys are full. Are the seats comfortable? Man, I reckon the majority of information that gets taken in is probably 20% to do with how comfortable the seats are in any given presentation. I'd argue that if someone doesn't like you as a person, there is a high probability that they probably won't like your ideas either. And I know you guys are smart, and I've seen the research, international studies around what is right. But on a human-to-human level, if you've got a booger in your nose, that is what they are noticing. See, what we would do is actually play up to the superficiality of kanohi ki te kanohi, face-to-face communication. So how can you win people over? Humour is a good way, but not everyone is funny, and that's okay. It is probably the quickest way to engender trust with an audience, though. Tickle the ribs, slip in a knife, you're away. Finding common ground. I always talk about my whānau, mostly because I'm Māori, but actually because it doesn't matter what power structures we have come from, everyone is now relating to me in some way based on whānau. And what a beautiful place to start. Not your PhD, not your position, but the most human of interactions, our relationships with our family. I've got a funny story about someone trying too hard to kind of relate. I know a lecturer and he was actually doing some part-time work on a radio station. Now in New Zealand, you want to pronounce Māori names correctly, and so he was doing the weather report, and he was making the best effort he could to pronounce all of these names. Right? Rotorua, Taupo, Whangarei. He was going through Pōneke, going through it, cool. The next kind of news item comes up, and he goes, and I just want to congratulate to the Division 1 winner who won Lotto at Takanote. Paused, cool, went ahead. About 5 minutes later, a caller gives him a call and says, yeah, the person who won Lotto was not at Takanote. The dairy is called Take Note. Trying too hard probably doesn't work in your favour. What is a caricature or a likeable person that you could play up to? How do you turn this kind of relationship on its head? Can you be the fun older auntie, the granddad who's really great at listening? Here's a hint, do not be the drunk granddad, do not embody that character. But what are people attaching you to when they listen to you? And then lastly, sometimes you're just going to decide that actually as much as you want an audience to like you, there's something else more important to you. I once had someone tell me that introducing myself in Māori may put some people off. And based on this logic, the truth is it might. But for me as a person, I thought breaking the stereotypes around how we perceive Māori was more important than those people liking me. And I thought I could tell some jokes anyways. But there actually are things which will go on to trump, and that's okay. Cool. The second question, do I like you? The second one is, why should I listen to you? Are you going to be interesting, funny, profound? Are you going to teach me a new way to view life, politics, help me to master my craft? Tell me. It takes so much effort to sit down and engage in listening to someone for however long. Why should they even bother? I'll quickly go past this point because I've already touched on it. But as I said, people are on their own island of self-interest. You need to pique their interest, get them in a boat, have them rowing over to you so you can have some genuine dialogue. The next question, and the crux of what I'm going to be talking about. An audience asks, do I trust you? Now, the obvious place to go is this. What makes your ideas better than mine? What experiences, research, or things have you learned that allow me to trust you as speaking the truth? However, in a work context, this is different, especially if you're working alongside other people and it's not a one-off interaction. When you're trying to convince people of what you believe, they are most often weighing your words and ideas up against the last year's worth of interactions with you. Here are some questions to get you thinking. Are you someone trustworthy? Are you someone who can apologize when they get it wrong? Are you someone who admits when they don't know something? Are you someone who is constantly eating your co-worker's lunch? Are you someone who puts the welfare of the people in front of you alongside your own welfare? Or even better, in front of your own welfare when it's necessary? Or put far more simply, do you walk the talk? Can people trust your ideas because they can trust you? Now, don't get me wrong, and I'm going to hammer this down. I'm not saying that empirical evidence, analysis, and insight mining is defunct. Like, that stuff will get you to the table. It'll get your ideas known, right? What I'm really talking about is that the best logic and evidence in the world can't compete sometimes with our own humanity, our subconscious. As the Franciscan monk Augustine put it, our greatest desires and loves. That is going to affect our ability to be persuaded or not. Let me tell you a story. I used to travel around the country, and I used to tell a story about my father. My father was a really big drinker. And I had one of those moments in life that you'd call a life-defining moment. What happened was I was walking into class. I'd had a really bad hangover. I was about 16 years old, another night of drinking on a weeknight. And my teacher looks at me and she says, Zane, you don't have to end up like him. Teenage boy, I look at her. She says, get out the back, wash your face, have some of my lunch, and clean yourself up. So I do that. Go out the back, wash my face, I have all of her lunch, and I sit down. But that message just gnawed away at me. It was actually an alternative narrative for my future. I didn't have to be like him. Now, once I told that story in a school in Porirua, I won't name which school. Statistically, these young people were just like me. I told that story. I think I actually cried. It was one of those moments where you just feel like heaven and earth meet. And then I went on to another school. I get an email a couple of days later, and this email sat on my pinboard for 5 years, and it said simply this word. Because you didn't end up like your father, I don't think I have to end up like my father. Now, the thing about that story, which makes it the most powerful, is I told that story to that boy 4 years after I hadn't had a drop of alcohol. As a matter of fact, I didn't go on to have any alcohol except for a half a glass of champagne when I got engaged to my wife for in total 7.5 years. Because what I knew to be true was that if I was going to try and help a young person live out this alternative lifestyle, I had to be walking the talk. Now, I've gone on to drink alcohol because I was challenged by my wife, who said, do you want to show to our kids abstinence or do you want to show them balance? Beautiful question. It's the type of annoying question that a wife asks. But he could trust the message because he could trust the messenger. And that's what I'm getting at. The final question in this really simple framework is, what should I do now? What should people do now? And you'd hope that they would take on board plain language in their context. I'll finish with a story and then I am done. So 2 years ago, I moved out of my role as a youth worker managing our youth programs, and I actually started overseeing all of our parenting programs, including large-scale leadership events where, some of our largest events, almost 3,000 primary intermediate students come out. And it's cool, like I'm in charge of this event. There are heaps of celebrity speakers. I'll walk into a room and there's an All Black and someone who's won a Grammy, and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's free muffins, and you guys are cool too. But I've actually been able to engage with these people and help them to tell their own stories. Just last year, earlier this year, I was with the new Children's Commissioner, a guy I respect a lot, Andrew Beecroft. He was the previous Principal Youth Court Judge here in New Zealand. And we were talking about some of his family mottos. He was speaking at a father's breakfast and would go on to speak to 1,500 fathers. I was challenging him. Give me the guts of your story. Tell me what you actually think. And he pushed back and he said this statement. He said, I don't know if I've been the best father. He goes, it's been difficult in my job. I've tried my hardest. And I said, that is what will engender trust. That's the real deal. He went on to speak, and he is an accomplished speaker. I have not contributed to his career at all. But there was this moment in each one of the fathers' breakfasts where heaven touched earth, and people said, I can trust that person because I can trust the messenger. Thank you.